Talia, frowning at the suspicious conversation, suddenly stepped between them. The girl, who had been examining the medicine bottle with sparkling eyes, was startled and quickly pulled her hand back. Talia stared at her suspiciously, and the girl gave an awkward smile before speaking evasively. "Your Highness probably won't ever need this medicine in your entire life. So I'm asking what kind of medicine it is." When Talia asked again irritably, the girl looked helplessly at Tyurin. But Tyurin merely avoided her gaze with an equally troubled expression. Annoyed by Tyurin's attitude, as though she were deliberately keeping a secret from her, Talia snapped sharply, "If you don't answer me, I'll report that suspicious drug dealing is taking place in this house." All three women's faces instantly turned pale. In the end, one of the girls confessed in a barely audible voice close to Talia's ear. "This is a love potion." Talia stared at the girl in surprise. The girl's cheeks flushed red with embarrassment as she added in a coy voice, "It's absolutely not a dangerous drug. It's just... you could say it's a medicine that gives a little courage to girls suffering from the fever of unrequited love." Talia gave a hollow laugh at the absurd explanation, but then abruptly turned her head and stared intently at Tyurin. "You really made a potion like that?" "It's merely a reagent that temporarily creates the illusion of being in love." Tyurin, looking embarrassed, rubbed the corner of her mouth and let out a deep sigh before explaining. "When you take it, your mind becomes hazy, your heartbeat speeds up, and your skin becomes hot. You also feel as though you've fallen passionately in love, and you develop a very strong attraction toward a member of the opposite sex nearby." Talia swallowed dryly and stared at the bottle clutched in the girl's hand. Perhaps noticing the strong interest in her eyes, Tyurin quickly added, "However, the effects wear off after about half a day. It doesn't leave any significant after effects either." Talia tried hard to conceal her disappointment. "Then what's the point? You'll be back to normal in less than a day, so why go through all that trouble for nothing?" The girl, watching Talia's expression as she spoke in a colder than usual voice, retorted indignantly, "Even if you rely on the medicine at first, it could become the beginning of true love, couldn't it? Don't you think the other person might hate you if they find out you drugged them? Then they just have to not find out." At the brazen answer, Talia raised one eyebrow. Just then, she heard heavy footsteps. Turning her head over her shoulder, Talia saw a guard approaching briskly and frowned. He spoke in an irritated tone. "Your Highness, I think it would be best if we departed soon. If we linger here any longer, people will gather again." "Fine. We're going, aren't we?" Talia snapped irritably, grabbed Tyurin by the robe, and headed back toward the carriage. She opened the door and sat down on the thickly cushioned seat. Tyurin followed and sat across from her, and soon the carriage began to move. Talia immediately buried her face in her lap as Khan fussed affectionately beside her, and she enthusiastically stroked him before casually speaking up. "Do you often make medicines like that?" "I make them occasionally when someone asks me to." "Really?" Khan suddenly raised his head and stared intently at her. It seemed he had sensed the longing hidden in her voice. As though suppressing it, Talia cleared her throat and added bluntly, "Refrain from doing so in the future. You could be branded a heretic for making and selling reagents that haven't been approved by the church. I'll keep that in mind." She gave a gentle smile. Talia stared intently at her face before eventually turning her gaze toward the window. Beyond the fields, where dusk had already begun to settle, the faint sound of an old Eastern song drifted through the air. The news that a strengthening treaty would be concluded arrived about 2 weeks after the spring festival ended. When she first heard the news, she didn't think much of it. Rumors that the war was ending had circulated several times before, only to fizzle out each time. But this time seemed different. A report arrived that both the Imperial delegation and the Northern Alliance had begun negotiations, followed by word that Varkas would be returning soon. Talia was overwhelmed by a happiness bordering on rapture. Varkas was coming back. She would be able to see him again after nearly half a year. Just repeating that fact to herself made her chest swell as though it might burst. How much anxiety had she endured all this time? Even though he was stationed in the outer regions of Balto rather than on the front lines, there was no telling when or how the course of the war might suddenly change. The Imperial family could order him to advance, or Balto could launch a large-scale offensive to recapture the castles in the outer regions. Whenever Talia imagined such possibilities, she would suffer from terrible depression. If Khan hadn't stayed by her side, she probably would have gone mad long ago. From the day she received the message, Talia checked the date several times a day, eagerly counting down the days until his return. But her excitement and happiness soon faded as though they had never existed. At some point, her physical condition had begun to deteriorate. At first, she thought it was simply fatigue. Every morning, her arms and legs felt incredibly heavy, and no matter how long she lay in bed, she could hardly ever feel refreshed. Her appetite had also noticeably decreased. After forcing herself to eat a few spoonfuls, her stomach would churn, making it difficult to swallow any more food. After several days, the symptoms became even worse. Without any particular reason, cold sweat would pour down her body, followed by sudden chills, and there were also frequent days when every muscle in her body ached. Especially at night, the insides of her legs would itch and her joints would throb, making it difficult for her to lie still. Talia frequently massaged her to alleviate the symptoms, and Marisin prepared new medicines for her several times, but there was no significant improvement. Instead, as time passed, more and more strange symptoms appeared. One early morning, Talia awoke feeling an intense prickling sensation all over her skin and was horrified to see the entire ceiling covered with butterflies with red wings. Only several seconds later did she realize that what she was seeing was a hallucination. The symptoms that had subsided for a while had started again. Talia sat on the edge of the bed and steadied her ragged breathing. How long had she been sitting like that? A warm breath suddenly brushed against the back of her neck. Talia raised her head and met a pair of blue-gray eyes staring intently at her. She desperately reached out her hand. She felt her limbs, which had been trembling slightly, gradually relax from the warmth of Khan's body. With one side of her face buried against Khan's thick, fluffy neck, she looked around the room. The thousands of butterflies had also vanished without a trace. After cautiously scanning the bedroom bathed in faint early morning light, Talia soon got up and walked toward the window. She threw the window wide open and filled her suffocating chest with the cold dawn air as though she were inhaling smoke. Then she spotted someone wearing a black robe hurrying past one side of the garden. She narrowed her eyes. Although the person had their robe pulled over their head, she could immediately tell who it was from their silhouette alone. Talia?